Hi, and welcome back to the White Noise podcast. Today, you're joined by me, Lyanna, and Skye, and we're going to be talking about The Handmaiden.
An absolute gem of a movie from Korean director Park Chan-Wook, someone that you'll definitely know if you follow Lyanna on Twitter. The 2016 romance thriller, which is set in 1930s Korea under Japanese rule, follows the tale of a thief hired as a handmaiden for a wealthy lady whose fortune she plans to steal. However, affairs of the heart begin to complicate matters in a non-stop shock story that will literally have you guessing right up until the very end.
That was fantastic. Okay, so first of all, just want to say, as per, if you haven't watched The Handmaiden, proceed with caution. We'll give a proper spoiler warning when we do go into proper spoiler territory. Maybe don't listen if you really do want to enjoy the film, because like with a lot of Korean films in particular, it's nice to go in blind.
Hugely. I've already said that if I had known anything about this film going in, I do believe I still would have enjoyed it. Would not have had the literal jaw on the floor reaction that I did have. So it's worth it. It's a huge payoff if you just don't know much to anything going into it.
I think it's also important to note right now that this was Skye's first Park Chan-Wook film.
Yeah, to my knowledge. I will just say quickly, because like I've seen some stuff in my time. And I can't always put like a name to it, but I'm pretty sure this is the first that I've seen, and it's definitely opened a gateway. It is my gateway drug into this.
Yeah, this is going to be like, wait, have you seen Parasite yet?
No.
Well, I was going to say this is going to be like the inching the door open, then you'll watch Parasite, and then it'll just be Korean cinema.
The reason I haven't watched Parasite is the same reason I didn't watch The Handmaiden until literally last night.
Yeah.
Was because so like over a year ago now, when we originally were going to start this podcast, The Handmaiden was meant to be the OG episode 1 film. But as Lyanna and I do, we had a bit of day drinking, got talking, and realised we didn't have about 2.5 hours to spare before I had to go home. So we picked something else, even if it ended up becoming redundant because it never got released. But I was just really excited to do it because of that, but that's also the reason I haven't watched Parasite, because I thought maybe one day we could do it for a reaction, we could do it for this. And I will admit I'm very expressive when I watch stuff that catches me off guard. So it's worth it for me to wait.
I think I would have paid to see your reaction to this, because obviously I suggested it to you so many times because I knew you would love it. I think most people would like this film, but in particular you.
My reaction was on par with the way I reacted to the mirror scene in Suspiria. Like that's how big my reaction was to it, even if it wasn't the same feelings I had for it. It was just, that first twist in The Handmaiden when it comes in, I was just like, no. It was just amazing, because I was happy enough knowing that it was a lesbian romance movie. And I had heard people obviously ranting and raving about it, and Lyanna had told me that I needed to watch it, and whenever Lyanna tells me I need to watch a film, then I must need to watch it. But then also it had the twists, and off cuff it was funny as well in certain parts. Yes. It was so entertaining, so wholly entertaining. It almost like ticked all the boxes that you want in a film.
I think you'll find that with a lot of Park Chan-Wook's films, and like I said to you briefly before we started this episode, he's friends with Bong Joon-ho. And they love to insert humour into things. And I think that just adds a whole new level to their films. They're intense, but they also have these moments of levity.
Yeah, it made it feel more genuine.
Yes.
Which I think, unfortunately, a lot of LGBT-led films miss the mark.
Yeah, definitely.
They don't feel genuine, they feel forced, and they feel like they've obviously been done for a shock or some kind of rebellion, whereas this film didn't feel like that. It just felt like two women falling in love.
Exactly. And I think
it felt very genuine.
Yeah, it did. And like, as we've said, it's just a completely loved film, really. It's, as I'd mentioned to you, it saw universal acclaim, still does. It competed for the Palme d'Or at Cannes, received a standing ovation, didn't win, but the fact that it was in competition is still, it's notable, to say the least. In our native UK, in 2017, it was like the highest grossing foreign film. So that is a big feat, considering as well that the UK is not that open to foreign films, let alone from a different continent. Like, I would probably say most years that's going to be something European. It's not going to
Yeah,
be East
that's
Asian.
as far as it tends to go. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know, yeah, it for something so different and bizarre and out there, like Park Chan-Wook often is, that's really
Hmm.
impressive coming from the UK. And like you said, this isn't your stereotypical like LGBT torture porn. It doesn't go for like the bury your gays trope. And I think we are going to go more into spoiler territory now, because we're going to have to
Yeah.
start going into actual aspects of the film.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
So obviously, like, yeah, again, especially with like any LGBT led film, the biggest thing in it was like the sexuality and the female relationship side of it.
Hmm.
And I just can't express enough how sweet the relationship between these two women
Yes.
was. It just, like, I didn't cry, but it felt like it could have made me cry.
You didn't
I
cry?
didn't cry. I didn't.
What?
It's because I watched the film with somebody else, and for some
Okay,
reason when I
fair.
watch stuff, I don't know, because I just hold it back when I watch with other people.
Hmm. Okay,
If I
yeah.
had been on my own, I'm sure I would have cried, because it was just like so touching.
Hmm.
Yeah, no, I didn't cry, but like it was just both, like I said, both of the, it was really obvious that they treated the actresses with the respect that they should have been treated with, especially when
Yeah.
handling like um delicate topics. And I don't just mean, the sexual awakening side of it. Like, there were other things that happened in it, like the
Hmm.
traumatic background and loss of people that they love. It was, yeah, it was obvious that the way that these two actresses were treated was portrayed on screen, because it also allowed the actresses to build a friendship and a relationship between the two of them
Yeah.
that really came across on camera, because
Hmm.
their relationship is portrayed, and it is referred to quite a few times, almost as well as like a mother-daughter relationship, because they take turns looking after each other and
Oh.
being the mother figures in their lives that they never
Yeah.
had.
Hmm.
And it just, yeah, it was just so sweet.
There's like a trust that really comes through, I
Yeah,
think. So you know
hugely.
that bit when they're dressing each other up, which is one of my favorite scenes in the entire film, because like as an LGBTQ plus woman,
Hmm.
that is something which I think personally appeals to me about like sapphic romance in stuff. It's like
Hmm.
that, and I hate to refer it to it in this way, but like that girlish play that you don't
Yeah.
see in like heterosexual romances. It's just
Hmm.
like just light-hearted fun. They're in corsets and these restrictive things and dresses which society would want them to be in a patriarchal society, but they're finding enjoyment in it with each other. And when there's
Yeah.
and the trust element of that was the fact that Hideko is letting Suki wear her amazing expensive garments, and Suki's
She
letting
wants
her
her to
dress
wear
her.
it as well.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Like there's this total like power play in that
Hmm.
scene where like the usual handmaiden and mistress like
Hmm.
dynamic is completely just turned on its head. And when they're both stood there naked, it just seems
Hmm.
so vulnerable, but not
That's
in
such a
like a
good point.
scary way.
Yeah. I was just actually just brought a good point. There's at no point do I really feel like one of them is above the other.
No, never.
Like, even in the sense of withholding knowledge, which is another big thing in this film.
Mm-hmm.
That we don't, as an audience, have all the information at the right time. The two women don't have all the information about each other at the same time, and yet they still form a bond despite that.
Yeah.
And the only time, I think, well, the only big thing their roles as handmaid and mistress play is the fact that the social barriers between them are already broken down.
Yeah, of
They're already
course.
put in situations. So, for example, the bath scene,
Mm-hmm.
they're in that situation already, not because they're lovers, but because it is their roles in society.
Mm-hmm.
But
And
because of that, they don't have the awkwardness of putting themselves in that situation. They're already there, if that makes sense.
that's true. And when we were talking about this a bit earlier, you had talked about the fact that they were in, well, we both talked about the fact they were in these intimate quarters, which would have helped that relationship develop.
Yeah.
They were
Oh,
given
they
so
were,
much
yeah, yeah,
privacy.
taken away from the world. Because I think one of the things I said to Lyanna is like I don't know if it's a slightly sadistic thing that I do, but especially when I love a film, I love to read bad reviews, because I want to know what parts of it people had an issue with.
Yeah.
And one of the things that people kept saying was that they didn't believe that in the 1930s two sexually repressed gay women would have latched onto each other that quickly. And like I said to Lyanna, to me, I never at any point questioned how quickly they formed a bond, because it was like, surely if you lived in a society that was repressing you not only by your gender but also your sexuality and your right to choose who you want to love, if you found somebody who you felt that same energy with, of course you would attach yourself to them as quickly as you could. So it just made perfect sense to me.
It's just like they're vibing.
Yeah,
the entire
that's
film.
it. That's
Not
all it is.
one of them does not turn to the other with their gaydar on and think, she
No.
gay? I don't know. Like that whole like lesbian trope, like where they can't
Yeah.
tell. That
And
never
then
happens. There's no coming out story. There's no questioning. They're just two women that fall in love, and I love that about this film so much. Because like there's been a lot of talk recently about LGBT cinema, especially with Happiest Season being released.
yeah.
Everyone seems to be talking about lesbian romance in particular, and everyone keeps talking about coming out as a part of the like lesbian or just gay love story. That is not even a concept in this film, which is weirdly refreshing.
It is. I think this is where the time period that they decided to set the film in came into like really helped, because you know, one of the things that people will say, and LGBT people will say, is that, you know, you never stop coming out, because the social structure and people, you know, just automatically assume everybody is straight until proven gay. And so you do, you know, when you start a new job, if you start a course, if you go shopping, sometimes if you ever reveal something about yourself, it will somehow always come out. Whereas with this, like you said, because it was these two women secluded from the rest of the world, there wasn't any need for that, because they were just existing in their world. They didn't need to be a part of the rest of it. And then at the end, actually even at the end, because we never see them join the rest of society, it's just them.
That's a
It's
good point,
always
actually.
just them. At no point does society taint them, you know?
And also when Suki like contacts her people from home, they don't even question it. She's just like,
No.
oh yeah, so this rich Japanese woman that I'm conning, turns out we're gay and we're gonna run away together. They're like, sick, how can we help?
I love the idea that that's exactly what the letter said that she sent to them. Turns out I'm hella gay.
She's only just learned how to write Hangul. She's just like, wait, how do you say
like,
hella? How do you write hella?
Oh my God. I love that. We have no proof that wasn't the case.
Also,
so,
actually,
hella gay, need to escape.
Speaking of Hangul and writing, that is another thing I absolutely adored about this, because when Suki reveals that she can't write, Hideko doesn't really care. She's like, okay, I'll teach you. And it doesn't even become this big thing like it was in other films where they're like, that's the plot. Oh no, they're teaching this poor unfortunate person, this poor soul, how to read and write, this illiterate queen. It's nothing like that. It's just a literal, it's a side plot which does come in handy, because you know, we love some planting and payoff, but it's a symbol of how she uses her advantages in life to help Suki. They use what they've gathered in their lives to help each other. Like there was difference in knowledge. Like Suki helps Hideko in that way, even though she doesn't actually need it, which we find out she does, and she.
But at the time, we don't know that. In the beginning, we don't know that. But even like after we find out everything, like I said, the one thing that doesn't change is just their positions to each other. They remain equals.
Yes.
And when they want to help, because this whole film also centers around people, you know, wanting to be in power, wanting to get what they want, wanting to do that. But what they want from each other isn't purely based on them. They want to give as much as receive.
Exactly.
And it's just like,
it's more about companionship than self. And I've recently been examining the romance stories that I consume, because I realised that a lot of the romance I personally consume is about like personal struggles within romance. And I know a lot of other people, it's maybe not struggles, it's maybe the positives, but it's very much about the self within a romance. Whereas this, to me, whilst it did have that, they never, obviously they're portrayed as individuals, but it's very much about them as a dynamic like their
Yeah.
relation. It's more about their relationship than anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that's so refreshing and so unique.
Mm-hmm.
It just, I don't know, I can't name anything quite like it.
I think one of the things you literally just made me realize,
Mm.
and again, it goes back to people having negative things to say about the film.
Mm-hmm.
If these are the things you didn't like about the film, it's because it's not a film for you.
Yes.
But obviously, one of the things people said that they didn't like was the explicit sexual scenes
Mm-hmm.
in the film. But also something else that we spoke about briefly, and we actually also spoke about in our last episode, was the fact that, you know, no matter how close two women were, they couldn't be gay. They couldn't be a couple. They couldn't be together.
Mm-hmm.
And can you imagine if, because obviously you talk about the companionship that they do have together, if they took out the sexually explicit scenes,
Mm-hmm.
guarantee you, even with like the director and everybody saying this is a lesbian romance film, people would have been like, I don't know, they seemed like really close friends. Like they obviously had a bond, and they just couldn't find the right men for them, because obviously literally all the men in this film are shits. So it's almost like those, I mean, this wasn't the reason, but it's almost like those scenes are also in there to be like, just so you know, these women are gay.
That's actually such a good point, because you know some fuckers out there would be like, just a couple of besties. Yeah. They would. People deny it so much. You get these characters in so many shows and films and just any piece of media which is so obviously gay. Mm-hmm. And the power of denial is immense. You're so right that they really did have to go the entire way just to be like, this is gay.
At no point in this film could you be like, oh, these two women, you know, they've found each other and they're really close, and obviously they have a good companionship, because the thing is, even without those scenes, it is obvious, because it's like you said, like some of the cutest scenes in it are like what was the line you said that you really liked about, is this what companionship's like in books?
Don't even, in part 2, when you're seeing it from Hideko's point of view and Suki's holding her face, like, is this the companionship they write about in books? It gets me every time. I think it's one of the most romantic. Yes.
It's so romantic.
Seriously, I said this to you before, I think this and In the Mood for Love tied most romantic films of all time, just straight up. It's that so doubt all the way through, the tension and the doubt, because it's not based in just like passion. There is a genuine connection, and I think that's where the doubt comes from, and the tension. You know, it's that constant overthinking, and I love that. Like Suki's like, she doesn't even realize she's falling in love with Hideko. The bit, right? Oh my god, I'm getting excited. The bit, you know, in the beginning when the Count turns up in the what would you call them? Are they forgerers? What would you refer to them as?
Oh, what?
The Korean household. They're all like, they're like thieves. They're like,
I think they're just they're literally thieves, because the thing she talks about is, well, she refers to herself. Sorry, Suki refers to herself as a pickpocket, and then also the whole idea of them finding newborns and selling the babies.
Let's just call them.
Yeah, he's
people. I don't know.
Yeah, I would say con people,
con artists.
Con artists. Because the Count is a forger.
I'd call him a con artist.
Yeah, well, he definitely is, but he actually purposely trained in forgery.
That's true.
He's been training.
Yeah.
But them themselves, no, I just say con artists.
Con artists, yeah. Well, say early on in the film, when he turns up at the con artist household, she's questioning the other girl, is not Suki, the other girl there, constantly asking him, is she pretty? Is she pretty? He doesn't answer her question. Then finally, when Suki meets her, she's like, damn, why didn't they tell me she was pretty?
Says about her,
exactly. And she's like, oh, I'm left speechless. I was like, oh my god. And like straight away, gay. It's like gay panic. And it's just brilliant. And even in the beginning, it's just laying these seeds that this is going to be a romance, because the con artist's like, I've forgotten his name, Fujiwara. He's talking about how he's going to seduce Hideko, and you could just hear Suki's inner monologue, and she's like, what does a forger and what does a con know about love? And I was like, here we go. Ooh, it's laying out. That's literally the tagline for the film. Like that is it.
That's
And
brilliant. There's some really good lines in this film.
there's some brilliant ones. You know, when you see like movie screen cap accounts, The Handmaiden, like it's just the perfect one for it.
Should we just make a white noise one just dedicated to
I
The
think we should.
Handmaiden?
Yes, we need to put a post. You'll see this when this episode goes up. There's going to be a post. It's like some of our favorite lines. It's just going to be like companionship. What does a con artist know about love? And then we'll pick two more. Oh, it'll be My Tamako, My Suki. That's a golden one.
I think I like the one that was like she said like ladies are the dolls of maids or something like that.
Oh my god, that one.
That was good.
Like don't. That's when she's unbuttoning her corset as well.
And she's literally like, I love it because, and again, it doesn't come across in a possessive way, but already she's like, this woman is mine.
Straight up.
Like she is mine. She is mine too.
Yeah, because look at the jealousy she shows when the
oh my god, she does. She doesn't hide it.
No, that back and forth I think is my favourite section of the film. And then when it's revisited again in part 2 and you see it from Hideko's perspective.
Yeah.
You know when Suki's looking through the window and Hideko's pulling away from the count, and she thinks he's just being a dick, whereas really he is being a dick.
I mean, he is being a dick, but not.
He's winding her up more than anything. He's not gonna really do anything. That bit as well. Oh, there's just so many amazing little romantic moments. There's not these grand gestures throughout. There are, you know, the odd ones, but it's more about the little moments, isn't it? Like when
again, that's what just makes it feel more genuine. Because I mean, obviously, you know, in relationships, you will get one or the other doing a grand gesture every so often because you know it is nice. But in reality, when you fall in love with someone, it doesn't come from them standing outside of your house with a boombox. No. It's from when you come home from like a really hard day and they've done the washing, or they're like, no, you know what, I'll cook tonight. Like little things like that make you think, I love this person, and that's what this film has. Like, no point is it this huge declaration of love. It's just, you know, you have what I want and I have what you want, and they're both willing to give it to each other.
It's like it's that building, isn't it? It's that whole idea of, do you just fall in love or do you choose it? And it's, in my opinion, it's a bit of both, isn't it? You fall in love and then it builds. And I think this film shows that perfectly. So there's like this hidden tension that's obviously present, and it's the choices they make for each other's benefit which build that really, really strong bond, to the point where they're literally sacrificing their safety and lives for each other. And it's just so touching. I
also love the fact that it was a happy ending.
Yes.
It was a happy ending, Lyanna.
How sad is it that is a unicorn in gay cinema?
Like I really off the top of my head cannot think of anyone's
maybe, but I'm a Cheerleader. That's the only one I can think of.
True.
But that is as cute as that film is. To me, I know a lot of people are going to kill me for this. I don't see it as this like incredible romantic thing. It's a cute rom-com, and of course gay people deserve that as well. Yeah. But like, I mean, when do we get these incredible romantic dramas with a happy ending?
Yeah. My love for But I'm a Cheerleader comes from the fact that it takes the stereotypes that people believe of homosexuality and makes fun of them. Like, I actually would never have described that film as a romance. The romance happened in it just because when you put teenagers together, they think they fall in love. That's why.
Yeah.
But I loved the fact that they took, just again to go off a bit of a tangent here, but they took the stereotypical tropes, made fun of them to make you realise, do you see how stupid it is? But I'm a Cheerleader makes fun of homosexual stereotypes, whereas The Handmaiden doesn't, to be honest, to me, again, it depends what you class as a stereotype, but doesn't have any stereotypes.
No.
You know, at no point do I look at it and think, okay, whether this stems from some truth or not, this is a really generic thing people believe. Like, because one of the things we spoke about that is really obvious is that Park Chan-Wook did actually consult with queer women.
Yes. There's nuance, isn't there? And you can feel it. We had said that you can just feel a woman's touch throughout this film. You had said yourself that if you didn't know it was a male director, you would have assumed it was a female director.
Oh, definitely. There were definitely parts of it that I'm not denying that a female director also could have got into the nitty-gritty of it. But there were parts of it where the female touch obviously stopped.
Mm-hmm.
But the biggest part of it, and the part where it mattered the most, was the relationship between the two women, and it was there. Like, it
Mm-hmm.
didn't feel voyeuristic for men.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if anything, like, the only times it felt voyeuristic were literally when, I think, during the scene when they're undressing each other, and the
Mm-hmm.
camera is literally placed in
Yep.
the placement of the actresses, and you only
Yep.
see their hands. But for me, it wasn't for sexual pleasure. It was for you to understand the intimacy and the closeness
I was
between
about to
these
say that
women
it was about
and what they're
intimacy and
experiencing.
eroticism rather
Yeah,
than just sex. Like,
yeah,
it's yeah, it's to form a bond. Whenever it does become more explicit, it's about their connection. It's
hmm
not about bodies, it's about them as people,
it's
especially the
one of those
sex
films,
scenes.
yeah, where I would, despite the explicitness of it, would say it's not a sexual film, it is a sensual film, because
Yes.
as much happens between them in the bedroom as outside of the bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the way they look at each other, the way they hold their bodies when they're in the same room as each other, the fact that
Mm-hmm.
their eyes are always looking for the other,
Mm-hmm.
um, shows the intimacy that they have more than, because you can, like, I mean, I'm sure somebody famous probably said this once in a much better way, but like, you can have sex with anybody. You can only have
Yes.
intimacy with so many people.
Yep.
And that's what this film was. It really portrayed the intimacy more than the sex, because obviously there are LGBT films that focus a lot on the sexual side of it. And to be fair, especially when you first come out, one of the things that you do explore is the sexual side of things, and it isn't always about finding
Mm-hmm.
your forever partner and things like that. But it's nice that not everybody focuses on that.
Yes, of
You know, it's
course.
nice that we actually have this film that is about these two women that might not be together forever, but for right now, their forever is now.
Yeah, of course. I think it's I think, like you say, it's really interesting to see like eroticism rather than sex explored. And I don't think there was anyone more perfect for that than Park Chan-Wook. Seriously, he's
Definitely.
so fascinated by eroticism, and he even said himself in an interview that he's interested about stories about life and death. And we had said earlier, where do they cross? Gothic. What is
Mm,
abundant in Gothic stories?
hugely.
Eroticism. You know, it's just
Mhm.
perfect. And like, I I've never even thought before about how perfect like a Gothic setting is for eroticism. Like, it's
Mhm.
crossed my mind, like with vampires and stuff, but never like non-supernatural. Do
I
you know
wonder
what I
if it
mean?
goes, yeah, back into the idea that, again, we spoke about in the last episode where we spoke about homoeroticism in horror.
Yeah.
The idea of, again, the quote unquote outcast and
Mm-hmm.
not social norm existing together.
Yes, that's
And
true.
that's what Gothic was. It was an outlet for not obviously just sexuality and homosexuality. It was for a lot of things. It was for all kinds of people that were just not accepted in
Yeah.
mainstream society.
Mm-hmm.
But that has continued, and it just shows how big of a thing it was, because it has continued throughout the years. Because when I was watching this, the set design and all things like that, one of the first things I thought was, this is Gothic. And it's
Yeah.
not a word I thought I would have associated with.
Well, when you consider the fact that, so Park Chan-Wook said when he was working with the production designer, they very much tried to show a difference between cultures, because like we said, this is based in colonized Korea. So we need that clash between not just Korean and Japanese culture, but also English, because the
Mhm.
Count is constantly trying to prove how cultured he is. He has this Victorian style house, the only
Mhm.
one in Japan, they say, which is interesting because this is adapted from a book called
Mhm.
Fingersmith, based in Victoria era England. And it's really interesting they took that into the production design of the film. You know, so they've got the basic building block elements of the narrative, but they also take kind of themes and style from the novel, which is really
Yeah,
interesting because a lot of people wouldn't do that.
they
They
would
would
just
just
change it
take,
completely. Yeah.
exactly, they would take the narrative and they would run. But what's so
Mhm.
interesting to me is that Park Chan-Wook, yes, he kind of did the opposite. He took the narrative, changed it a fuck ton, but kept a lot of the tone.
Yeah, the feelings of it, the
Yeah.
yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
I think, well, it definitely worked because it was just, beyond anything else,
Mm-hmm.
so beautiful to watch.
Mm-hmm.
Everything about it was just like so polished and like, yeah, wherever you looked on screen, there was
Yeah.
something like really interesting to look at, and it was just
Yeah, it was everything. This just the mise en scène is incredible. Like the production design, the cinematography, the costume, which I am going to go into in 2 seconds. But one thing I do want to note on is the amount of, not to go too technical on you, Skye, but the wide angle lenses, which you can note because there's so many pillars in this grand house, you can see them bend on the sides of the frame. That's when you know it's a wide angle lens, and it's just to show like the sheer size of the place and the
Oh yeah,
isolation. And it's just like, particularly in the beginning of the film, I noticed a lot of wide lenses used because, you know,
the
it's
isolation they both feel. Yeah.
exactly, yeah, because it's Hideko feeling alienated from her entire world, and then it's, you know, the alienation of colonialism for Suki. And I just thought, like, to use this amazing grand production design and then on top of that use wide angle lenses, it's magnificent. Like, this film is perfect in so many ways. No wonder it's been acclaimed everywhere, because you know, we're talking amazing performances, which we've not even touched on yet, amazing production design, amazing cinematography, amazing direction, and the music, which we also haven't even touched on. It's
Oh
just
my god, yeah.
everything about this is so romantic and gorgeous and beautiful in every single way. Like, if you can't tell by now, we want you to watch this film.
Oh yeah, it's a great film. We're definitely. I wish we were being. Actually, no, I'd talk about this film obviously if we weren't being paid to promote it. We're just going to be here to promote it anyway.
Mate.
Do you know what? I'm so glad you brought up the music, because annoyingly, it's one thing I didn't make a note of, but it's actually something I said to my girlfriend while we were watching it. I was like, I love the music.
Yes.
Like, it's amazing. And one of the things I noticed about it is that it is, again, whilst being predominantly a romance, it is a chop and change of different genres, which is very reflected in the music. Like, at points, it's quite scary. Like, because the way the music changes, and I get it. It's also accompanied by the fact, you know, it's the house. I think it's like the first time Suki's being shown around. Like, she's just arrived. She's being shown around the house, and it's dark, and there's nobody around, and there's actually like quite
it's intense,
unnerving music.
yeah.
And I was like, this is weird. I didn't expect to be scared by this film. Like, there's a lot of the things I didn't expect, but that was the first time in like the first whatever 10 minutes or so I was like,
interesting you say that, because the first time I watched it I did notice the same, and having seen a lot of other Chan-Wook films, I really thought it was going to lean way more into the thriller aspect, which I'm not gonna lie, I really would have liked to see if there was like an alternate version of this film, but I wouldn't want that to be the definitive version of this film. I love it the way it is. So I like that it's romantic. Balance. Exactly. Like, yes, it would be interesting to see that creepier version that it hints at in the beginning with like some of its music and all, but at the end of the day, we got a perfect romance. So
it's also one of the first times I've watched, like, so the film's like, what, it's like 2.5 hours, like the original cut of the film.
Yeah,
like not the extended. So it did. Like, usually, and I'm going to use examples that people probably know, but like you can't really compare them. But for example, the film Meet Joe Black.
Yeah.
I think it's like 3 hours long. And one of the reasons I actually love watching that film is because I watch it, I think this is fucking ridiculous. Why are they spending literally like 5-10 minutes on these long looks? Or if you want to talk about an unnecessarily long, uncomfortable sex scene, that film has it. Not The Handmaiden. But this film at no point was I like, oh, you know what, they probably could have cut that down a bit. Like, they didn't extend anything that didn't need to be extended.
I think it was perfect screenwriting.
Yeah.
You know, like your basic of any storytelling kind of lesson would be almost every single scene. Well, every single scene ideally should serve a purpose. It's not like some huge narrative step forward has to happen, but at least build character. Something. And every single scene in this did that. Every single shot in this did that. It was just
one of the things. So I think one of the things we both said is that we really don't have any critiques of this film.
No.
And when I was watching it, as everything was developing, I did have critiques. Like, one of my critiques in the beginning was the way that scenes were cut off almost suddenly. It's like it feels like there's more. And I knew that there was an extended version, so I thought, oh, okay, maybe they had to cut it down for time. That's why I thought it was a shame, because obviously I know that you have to stick to what studios tell you. But I thought it was a shame. But then, after the first part was over, and it gave you the second part, and then the third part where they did extend those scenes slightly or they changed the perspective, it made sense.
Yeah.
Because they stopped this scene at this place, or they didn't show it from this perspective, when they did show it again, it didn't make it boring, it didn't make it repetitive, it did feel fresh and new, and literally honestly felt like I watched three separate, well, not three separate, but like three films in one sitting.
But I think what helped even more is they used different angles, which if you ask me is fucking genius, because a lazy filmmaker would have just used the same scenes.
Recycled it, yeah.
Exactly.
Like Disney did.
Because when you had mentioned earlier about the sex scene, they just explore it more in the second part. It's like, you know, they don't show you all the sex in the beginning, which I think is genius. And then another example is when Suki is urging Hideko to marry the Count, and she pushes her back into her maid's quarters.
Yeah, doesn't make sense at first.
No, in the first part, you see that from... Who do you see that from? You see that from, obviously, Suki's perspective. And in the second time around, you see it from Hideko's. Well, obviously the other way around, you see Hideko like pushing Suki, but you know, that's kind of
like literally because the narrative has been from
exactly
Hideko's
you're seeing it
perspective.
From like visually you're seeing it from Suki's perspective, but narratively you're understanding,
because now you're put in the position. I mean, this is such an interesting thing with film, because like obviously with books it's easy because you choose the point of view, you choose first, second or third. Films, it's difficult because, you know, it's not a game. You can't literally put somebody in first person perspective. Because it just doesn't... I mean, maybe there is a film out there where they've done it and it works. I just haven't seen it. But personally, I can't imagine it working.
No.
But this film does put you in the perspective of both of these women at different points. And you get this understanding from them. And I think one of the reasons why I think it was really interesting that they extended the sex scene in the second half is because by then you understood the relationship between them more, and that's why to me it didn't feel exploitive and voyeuristic, because it wasn't done to be like these women are having sex. It's like this is the connection that they've made, and now they're expressing that in a physical way. And
also it's a really important part of the novel. I haven't read the full novel, but from everything I've read talking about the adaptation, sex is a huge aspect of the novel, so to just erase that from a film adaptation would just be... it just wouldn't make sense, and it would contribute to just, you know, alienating lesbian women further. Like, why should they be denied sex scenes just because it's visual and considered more explicit than sex scenes? It's
the
ridiculous.
amount of like heterosexual sex scenes I've had to sit through.
Exactly.
Like,
and and we all know it.
Like I said, there are situations where they do not need to be in there. It's like, and not even in like, oh, you know, I don't want to see it. It's more just, you know, I would much rather you have cut that and then extended this part of it.
Yeah.
And again, that's why I love this film, because they had that extended physical side of it, but I wasn't mad about it because they had spent so much time on the intimacy.
Yeah, it's almost like it had earned it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Like, obviously you don't need to like earn it, but in the same way you do.
Well, it's like you said about every scene should have a point, whether it's a big point or a small point that contributes to the narrative. And it's the same with sex scenes. Like, unless you are doing it for a gratuitous nature that you know, you just want to be like, here's some sex, just judge it up a bit. Sometimes it's like you said, it's like a lazy way to make something more interesting because you've got two naked people on screen. Whereas this, again, didn't need to do it, but it did. And I didn't feel offended by it. I didn't feel uncomfortable. I didn't feel disgusted. I didn't like... It was there. I felt the relationship between these two women, and it made sense.
It's insane to me that a film could repeat the same sex scene and it just have a totally different meaning.
Yeah.
It's incredible, and that just shows the power of editing and pacing and writing. But another thing that I want to note is, we're talking about all these sex scenes, it's really important to note that it was a closed set. So Park Chan-Wook made sure there were not more people on there than needed. There's literally the basic core crew, and there were, I'd like to imagine, intimacy coordinators like with normal people, that was released earlier this year.
I think I read somewhere that they made a point of filming, I think the sex scenes were some of the scenes they filmed first, because Park Chan-Wook understood how straining it can be on actors and actresses,
Yeah.
especially when they, this is the first thing they're doing together, and now you've got to
Mhm.
get naked.
Yeah.
And he didn't want that to weigh on them
Mhm.
through the whole production. And I'm also pretty sure I read somewhere that he actually had no men on set
No, I don't
at
think he
all.
did, or he had maybe like one. Very
Yeah,
minimal.
yeah.
Yeah.
Which is
And
how it should be, because it is, and it's not a prudish thing. It's a very intimate thing you do,
yeah.
and then doing it with a stranger and weirdly simulating it, I think is even more
Of
like
course, because
it's even more uncomfortable.
I don't know, and I probably should have researched, but I don't know if either of the actresses is queer. I
I
don't
was
think they
wondering
are,
that. Yeah,
but I'm really amazed if they aren't, because
yeah.
that is some fucking incredible acting on their part. Like, there was genuine like sexual chemistry. Like, if that is
Yeah.
acting, I am fucking amazed. But
Hmm.
I just want to point out to you, I'm not sure if you knew this, but Kim Min Hee, who plays
Hmm.
Hideko, has been in other films where she's like, men are disgusting, let's run away together to other women. So I'm
I
getting
did not know
vibes.
that.
Yeah, I'm getting
Should I was
vibes.
really surely,
Yeah.
surely.
So funny. But and another thing I want to say is we're talking about sex scenes. Ending the film on a sex scene, perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect choice
Hmm.
for this film.
Hmm.
Couldn't end it any other way, really, could you?
Hmm. Definitely.
They've earned that. Like, they're free of everything. They're just like, fuck it, let's have fun.
And that's what it felt like as
It
well. It
really
was just like
did.
they were so happy. You felt
Yeah,
like, so like in the other scene you saw them in, you felt their intensity, and in this scene they were happy. They were away, they were
exactly.
free, the villains
Hmm.
were gone,
Yep.
and I think actually one scene that we haven't spoken about, sexual wise, but is just as poignant, is Hideko's masturbation scene.
Oh my god, that was incredible.
Because again, usually my mind figures it out and I'm like, oh, this is probably what's happening. Did not. And just the power that she has in not only, like I said, remaining eye contact with him and being like, you can see this but you can't touch it, but
Hmm.
the power she's taking back over her own body, because she's only ever been used
Wait, sorry, that
for
was
this.
the timer. That was the timer. If you
Oh,
could just go back one sentence, sorry.
that's all right.
You said she was
um
maintaining eye contact
when
before the
she was
timer went off.
maintaining eye contact with the count,
Hmm.
um but also, like I said, she's taking back the sexuality and the dominion over her own body, because up until, like I said, that point, she wanted to kill herself, just
Yep,
like her aunt did. That was her only escape. Whereas now she's like, no, this is mine. Before
yep.
anybody else's, this is mine, and it's the truth. And that's why, like I said, when she's with Suki, like I said, she gives herself to this woman
Mm.
willingly. It's not taken from
Yep.
her.
She's been
So yeah.
used for men and she's reclaiming that part of
Hmm.
herself for herself.
Hmm.
It's amazing. And also in that scene, let's point out, obviously we have to do the whole fake the blood, consummate the marriage thing, because it's
Yeah.
assumed that she would be a virgin beforehand. So that's a
Hmm.
nice little nod to
That's very true. Yeah.
patriarchal thinking, which of course, yes, okay, she was trapped in her house, but there's wider context. And also in that scene, the gloves, we've got to talk about the gloves.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Yeah,
Amazing.
the
I
camera
did.
lingers
Yeah.
on them in that scene.
Hmm. I did notice that as well. The fact that,
Mm,
like you said before, that she does wear gloves, which, like you said, is a sign of um, aristocracy and things like that. But also the fact that she only takes them off when she's with Suki, like she,
yes.
like being that vulnerable, like, because especially for the first part,
Hmm.
Hideko is seen as this vulnerable, fragile, on the
Hmm.
brink of breaking character. And she makes it very obvious that she's not.
Yes.
She is very strong.
Yeah.
And it's almost like the gloves are her way of being like, you can take as much as you want that you think you can from me,
Yep.
but there are certain parts of me you won't.
Yeah, and it's the thing
That's
he
why when
wants
she, yeah,
most. As much
exactly,
as
when
he
she,
says he cares about her money, he also even admits he's basically fallen in love with her. She's
yeah,
like,
he
fuck
just
you,
wants
no.
dominion over her.
Yeah.
Hmm.
He just wants
And
to own
that
her
is
in every
shown.
way. Mm.
Yeah, that is shown again by the way he treats her, the fact that he
Yep.
has this no interest in her. The only time he touches her is when he's teasing her,
Hmm.
until he does try to have sex with her, and then
Yeah.
she's like, no.
I also want to point out that scene where she's like masturbating in front of him. I love that she removes her kimono.
Hmm.
Like, just this repressive thing. Like,
Hmm.
whilst like kimonos in general are not you know, they're not considered oppressive. It's this like gorgeous traditional garment
Mhm.
in the context of that scene, and maybe this
Yeah.
film, it is considered a restrictive thing. She removes
Mhm.
it, does her business, puts it back on, like, you're not touching it, and it's brilliant. She's keeping eye contact the whole time.
Yeah.
Also, another thing about that scene, because I think the scene sums up the film, when she's like getting off, it's just
Mhm.
adds layers to the confusion, the complexity, because Suki from the other room thinks she's hearing them have sex, and also
Yeah.
she's basically getting off hearing Suki like singing. You can
Yeah.
kind of hear it in the
Yeah.
distance.
Yeah.
I was like, there are layers to this. This is
It was
all,
amazing.
this is so
Yeah.
many shades of bizarre, but like it's
Mhm.
also like, whoa. Like I can't even describe it.
It's like
And
I said to you, the whole thing felt like a giant puzzle, and you were just being
yes,
given the pieces as you went along, and then by the end, you were just fully satisfied with what you had
yep,
consumed.
it's incredible. You don't feel like you want to go and watch Your Movie Sucks or Cinema Sins. Like you feel
Yeah.
satisfied by the end. That could
Hmm.
just be us, but I
True.
like to think
Yeah.
everyone does. But before we went on that tangent about that scene in
Yeah.
particular, and I'd said about the gloves, just want to note, as Skye said, symbol of aristocracy, and she takes them off when she's with Suki. But I think a bigger thing is that she's taking them off when she's in control, when she's not putting on a
Yeah.
performance. So when Suki gets taken to the mental institution in place of Hideko has her gloves off when she's looking at Suki. She puts them back on before turning back to the count. She
Oh
stops
wow, that's
crying,
so
puts
true.
the gloves back on. I'm like, bitch, it's genius.
Yeah. It's
It's brilliant.
amazing.
She's wearing them when she's doing the readings.
Hmm.
It's just, it's genius. And also, it gave me Theo Crane from Haunting of Hill
Mm.
House. Like, as in, I'm gonna
That's
numb
yeah. That is
myself. Yeah.
exactly what I thought as well.
And there's this weird eroticism to them as well. Like, as much as it's more erotic
Hmm.
when she doesn't have them on, because, you know, bare touch, there is
Hmm.
like a creep. I don't want to say creepy, because that
Mm.
could be insulting, but it does give you almost like a BDSM vibe when she's
Yeah.
doing them in the performances, because they're like leathery kind of ones, aren't they?
Hmm.
They're different. And you had pointed out earlier all her drawers of gloves.
Yeah, she has like 6 drawers of gloves. And again, I know it's because of her position as a lady in society, but like, man, no one needs that many gloves apart from her, obviously.
You know, the bit when she's about to go to the reading and
Hmm.
she's saying like, oh, help me choose gloves. Like, now I know about the glove metaphor. I feel like every time I watch that film, I'm going to see that bit where she's
Do you know what
opening
I've
them
also
for her.
just
She's
realised as well?
resistant. What?
Even after I found out about obviously her reading the erotic stories to the men, I did
Yeah.
not pick up the fact when she said I'm going to my reading or my reading
Yeah.
lesson or whatever. Did not
Yeah.
pick up that's where she was
Awful,
going.
innit?
Genuinely still thought she was going to just a normal lesson.
Sad, innit?
Oh my god.
I think the whole reading thing is so perverse. We haven't even touched on that. It's just
Hmm.
so, so hideous. The
But
scenes shown when
again,
she
it,
was a
it
kid are
yeah,
awful.
it comes from the idea that like she's had, her whole childhood innocence stolen from her.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and like you said, it's through reading these erotic stories.
Yeah.
Like, it somehow, like you said, it makes you feel dirty and horrible watching the scene where
Yeah.
she's reading to these men because of
But
their reactions. Like they're not
yeah,
even touching her, and it's
no.
just like, oh
It's because she's on display and they're using it for their own satisfaction. There's even
yeah.
a point where I is it the uncle or is it the count who says you can read out a different story and people are imagining different things. That is so unsettling
Mm. I think
because
it's I
you
think
don't
it's
know
the
what's
uncle
going on in their
actually.
head. Yeah, it just
Yeah.
seems darker, doesn't it? Because it's like, oh yeah, what are they thinking whilst this
Hmm.
poor girl's reading? Because they must know she's not choosing to. They don't care, they're
Hmm.
enjoying it. And the fact that she adds these little performance flares, that really got
Hmm.
under my skin, because
Hmm.
she's not come up with them on the spot. She's been told to do them because, like you
Yeah.
said, she has reading lessons. She doesn't just have reading, she has lessons where he's training her.
Teaching,
Disgusting.
yeah, what he wants her
Yeah.
to do.
It's
I
hideous. She's
also
just been
thought
training to do it. Ooh.
it was so interesting. Like, again, it just brings the whole movie feels so connected. I don't know how else
Yeah.
to explain it.
Planting and payoff, mate.
Yeah, but like, when the uncle is talking about how, like you said, people imagine their own stories when they hear it, and then one
Mm-hmm.
of the other biggest themes in this film is the idea of the unreliable narrator.
Yes.
The fact that
Oh.
you are seeing the story from one point of view and you believe it and you sympathize with this character, and then you get shown it from the other point of view and you're like, oh. And like one of the things people hate the most is when their views get challenged, because
Yes.
they're led to believe so strongly another way that it's like, nope, that's not how you thought it was. And it's just, I thought it was so interesting because even though he was talking about the stories and he was talking about the fact, you know, it was even more explicit and sexual and gratifying for the men to have stories read to them instead of like watching her do things, was because
Mm-hmm.
like you said, they can imagine it their own way.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I just thought it was so interesting how it then played back to the whole idea that we've just been told this story in 3 different ways.
Listen, it's just,
Mm.
this film is like challenging and unique and interesting in so many ways without feeling overwhelming. Like you
Yeah.
still feel like you could just enjoy a film.
Hmm.
And I had said to you earlier, that's something I find incredible about, like, in particular, Park Chan-wook's films and his peers. They will add this meaning to their films without making it the film.
Hmm.
And I think that in a way, makes it more powerful because it it's confident enough in what it's saying that it doesn't feel the need to slap you across the face with it. You
Yeah.
know, so as we've discussed in the past nearly an hour, we've talked about colonialism, what we could possibly talk about, because
Hmm.
we are incredibly uneducated on East Asian
Yeah.
colonialism, and I'm not even going to pretend that we know enough. Sexuality, a few other topics which I've forgotten off the top of my head.
But
we
they're there.
They're there, and it's just, I don't know. I don't think I can name another film which so confidently
Hmm.
balances so many different ones, and also on such a difficult narrative, like you're saying, from different perspectives. Like, it's a brave filmmaker to do that, and I
Oh,
respect it.
hugely. Yeah, well, I think you can tell that we have extremely positive reviews of this film and would highly encourage you to go watch it if you haven't. I
Mm-hmm.
really hope anybody that's still listening now hasn't, sorry, I hope everyone has watched it, because I would just hate for it to be ruined or anything to be taken
Yeah.
away, you know, experiencing it that first time. Even then, it's still worth watching. It just is.
Mm-hmm.
But it's definitely, like I before we started recording this, I said to Lyanna, it's one of those films that when people say to you, if you could have a film or a book erased from your mind so you could experience it again, what would it be? And it would definitely be this film. I would love to watch it not knowing anything again and just experience everything.
Yeah, definitely. This is something I'd meaned to mention earlier on in the episode, but I'll just mention it here as we're kind of wrapping thoughts up, is that there's this there's this topic of the Korean New Wave, obviously in Korean cinema, and this film did not start it. By no means is it going to end it, but I think it's a perfect example of what New Wave cinema can be for a country. You know where I'm going with this. I feel like I lost
Yeah.
my train of thought there, but it's, I don't know how to explain. I just think that this film is clearly in my top 4, and I have many thoughts about it, and I just can't even put them into words. I just get lost because I think when something touches you so deeply, you can't necessarily explain it.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to watch
It,
it and feel it for yourself.
well, that's just it, and that's what this film is. Despite the explicit nature that it does also have, the majority of it is in the intensity, the intimacy,
Yeah.
the energy, and the feelings of it, and that's why, yeah, like a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
things that you'll probably find in your life that you have such a passion and love for,
Mm-hmm.
it's difficult to explain why, because it's
Yeah.
something you do have to experience yourself.
And you saying those things, passion and intensity and all,
Mm-hmm.
those are things which I really would say are so present in Korean cinema. If there's going to
Mm-hmm.
be one thing that I add to my end note, which is obviously watch The Handmaiden, it would be check out more Korean cinema. Not just Park Chan-wook, but yeah, maybe
Mm-hmm.
Park Chan-wook because he's incredible. I've already said to Skye, you gotta get going with Park Chan-wook.
Oh, I'm on it. Like I said, this film was my gateway. I'm going.
Seriously, it's, I don't know, if you enjoyed this, it could be worth a go, because you never know, you might find some stuff which you didn't really think did exist, aka Old Boy, because nothing is
Mm-hmm.
quite like that film. So I think everyone listening and Skye should watch Old Boy. Oh fuck my phone.
I think that's a sign from the universe to wrap this
Yeah,
baby up.
yeah. I will edit that out. Or I'll leave it in, we'll see. As we've said, incredible film on so many levels for so many different reasons. I personally can't put it into words. I'd like to say I could do that cool thing a lot of podcasts do where they're like, sum it up in 3 words, but I don't know. I couldn't do it.
10 out of 10. That's my 3 words. Is that even 3 words?
Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. That's, never mind.
Mine might be like, actually now I think about it, might be like, letterboxed, 5 stars, done.
Brilliant. There we go. Well, those are our summaries. If that doesn't convince you, I do not know what will.
We're really bad at endings.
Yeah.
Like, this could literally be it. We'll just fade out to me going, Park Chan-Wook is incredible, and I could talk about his entire filmography. Just go on from that.
Pretty much.